bear with me, guys. This is probably, honestly, it's one of the most difficult media availabilities we do all year, just because we're 2 weeks out from the first day of the league year, 8 or 9 weeks from the draft, and honestly, the last 30 days, like, not a lot has gone on that you would can really talk about. So, but I'll take on whatever I can take on from you guys. I'm not going to really get into what we may or may not do moving forward into the month of March. And one of the reasons is there's so many moving parts this year, just with every team, I think. So things almost change on a daily basis. So it's going to be an interesting next couple of weeks, and certainly an interesting whole month of March as far as how things kind of play out with everybody, not just us, but the whole league. But with that, I'll just open up to you guys. I see a lot of hands up already. So.
All right. Start off with Pop.
Hey, Tom. You've had a couple months now to work with Brandon. He's been in the building. What's one thing you've learned about Brandon over the last couple months that maybe you weren't aware of or didn't know when you guys hired him?
Well, you certainly get to know people a lot more on a daily basis than you do just over the whole, the whole interview procedure. But I'm going to tell you what, the one thing that he loves what he does and has a passion for football, and that shows up every single day. And I love people like that just have a passion for what they do. And I'm starting to see that from the rest of the staff. Now, I've worked more with Brandon, the last month than I have with all the assistant coaches. That's going to come as we work through free agency, work through the draft, OTAs, and then the season, get a chance to know the assistant coaches much better than I do now. But with Brandon, I mean, he loves what he does. He loves coming in the building, loves to work, loves coaching football, talking football, and that's fun to be around.
Obviously, you're not going to discuss any specific players, but in your end of season presser, you said that you needed to add more talent on the offensive line. Just generally speaking, how do you feel about the talent pool at offensive line, both in the draft and in free agency, as you try and sort of build up that group?
Well, let's not forget, we need to add talent amongst the whole football team. We're trying to build a balanced football team. I don't think, we didn't make the playoffs this year. We're 7-9. I don't know if we're, just a better offensive line away from winning a championship. So we're trying to build the whole football team. But to talk about your question, yeah, there's plenty of different avenues to add to all different areas of football team, including the offensive line, whether it's trades, free agency, draft, developing our own. So there's plenty of different avenues there.
There's been a trend among some teams, not valuing first-round picks as much and being willing to trade first-round picks for proven players. Philosophically, how do you sort of approach that idea of trading early draft picks for proven players versus drafting players that obviously would come in on a rookie deal? That's obviously something that you've talked about before, but just philosophically, how do you approach that idea?
I don't know if there's been enough of them recently that I would call it a trend, but obviously it's been done. But each situation is just unique in itself, so it's hard to have a general philosophy on that. The one thing, obviously, a rookie contract is a lot easier on your salary cap than a high-priced veteran contract. But every situation when it comes to those is kind of unique in itself, so I don't have a general philosophy on it.
And obviously, just speaking with Brandon over the last couple months, you've gotten sort of an idea of what type of player he's looking, I guess, specifically for his defense. Is there value, generally speaking, of bringing somebody in from the outside who has familiarity with his scheme as you guys try and transition to a new defense?
There is. It's this. I've been through, other head coaching changes before, and then even GM changes. Sometimes you're comfortable with the players you've had because you know exactly what they can do for you, both on the field and off the field, so you know what you're getting. But I will say, as far as if you're talking about just scheme-wise, Brandon, I think, has his base philosophies, but it's not like we're going to be running the exact same things he ran with the Rams because the Rams have different players than we do. So, but no, I think whenever there's new coaches that come in, yes, there are some players that you may have familiarity with that may fit, that you feel good about because you know them very well. But you got to be careful with that too. But yeah, that's kind of normal in this league, and not just from scheme, but just knowing the type of person you're getting. Because whenever you're bringing somebody in from the outside who's been in the league for 4 or 5 years, we knew these players very well coming out of college, but then once they go to a different team, you kind of lose that touch of where they are now. It could be 4 or 5 years later. So, and when you're signing a free agent, when you're making a trade, maybe signing a player off the street that hasn't been out of college for a while, you really want to make sure they fit what you do both on the field and both fit what you do off the field, fit your culture as well. So, so having some familiarity. And with our staff right now, not just Brandon, but offense and defensively, we have a lot of guys from a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different places. I think that's going to help us, at least in year one, as we're looking at players from the outside, and that we'll have some good familiarity about those guys.
Thanks.
Chris Arian.
Hey, Tom, thanks for doing this. We talked a couple of weeks ago, but as you guys get through this process, and obviously every team's in the same boat, what's been the biggest challenge in evaluating players who either A, opted out last year or have a very small sample size of work last year, or just had their seasons canceled in general, knowing that players can make a big leap from, their sophomore to junior to senior year?
It's true. I mean, there's a couple players in this draft that maybe redshirted as a freshman, played as a sophomore, and then opted out as a junior. So you only have 1 year of college film to look at, which is not typical for what we do. We went through our pretty heavy draft meetings recently, and we've always done them before the combine. So this is nothing new for us. But our college scouts did a great job this year evaluating these players, because it was a little bit different. You didn't have as much of a body of work on some players as you usually would. But I will say just the fact that those guys, they weren't able to travel as much as they were able to, in a normal year, gave them a lot of time to grind a lot of film on guys. So, but yeah, some of them have a smaller body of work than usual. But we're all in the same boat with that. And our job is to project players, college players to professional players, and it is a projection. So that's our job. That's a scout's job. And quite honestly, I feel very comfortable where we are right now with the whole process, really based on the fact that our college guys did a great job this fall. We sat through our draft meetings, and when we finished those, I felt great. And I feel like, and we're still just getting started as far as we still have some more information to gather this spring. But I really like where we are right now, despite the fact that we went through a pandemic in the fall.
And Tom, the fact that you have 9 picks and we are in a year where maybe evaluations will look a little bit different, does that make you feel good that you have that amount of picks, knowing that maybe, hey, in the middle rounds, you could get a guy that you guys are really high on that maybe necessarily teams weren't as high on?
Well, it's always good to have more at bats. It's better to have 9 at bats rather than 4 at bats in the draft. So, but I really, by the time we get to the end, and I felt the same way last year with the draft. The draft was different last year as well. Not as different as this year, but it was different last year. By the time we got to the end, I felt like we were in the same place as we usually were. And I'll feel the same way once we get to April. We'll be in the same place we usually were in a regular year, and we'll be able to, get up there and draft.
Appreciate it.
Jeff. You can do it, Jeff. It's been a while.
There we go. Sorry about that. I couldn't unmute myself. I think maybe it was a first strike by your Charger team here. Tom, so I'm going to try to ask you about a specific player, or give you a chance to at least be able to answer.
Okay.
What can you tell us about Hunter Henry? I mean, obviously he's a guy that everyone knows is out there. We're all assuming that you would like him back, trying to get him maybe to a long-term deal. What can you tell us about Hunter's situation?
Well, he falls under the category of things we've done right. You draft a player, he develops and turns into a really, really high-level tight end for us and a big part of this football team. So, our philosophy has been, draft, develop, and resign. Now, can you do that with every single player? You can't, not in a salary cap era, and certainly not in an era where we are right now where it's lowered. But doesn't change how we feel about him, and we know what he means to the football team, and we'll just kind of see where our options are. But, yeah, he's a big part of the football team, and just love how he plays the game. He fits what we do on the field, off the field, and he's a high-level player.
This, with the salary cap situation, do you anticipate over the next couple of weeks that there's going to be a ton of guys who are going to be are going to be cut league wide and will be available more than in past season?
That would be my guess. It'd be more than prior seasons, just because, no one had anticipated the cap going down to where it is now. So that would be my anticipation. I guess we'll see for sure in the next couple weeks, but that would be my thought.
And Tom, we've talked about in the past here about your cap situation is actually pretty good compared to a lot of teams. Are you in a position where you are not going to cut anybody, or is that still a possibility for you guys?
I mean, you try and keep as many options open as possible, but yeah, we're in a better situation than most, which is good to know. It gives us some flexibility, but it's not like we have so much cap space that we can be overly aggressive in free agency. I think, I'm not going to go through salary cap 101 with you guys, but, your cap number may look good, but once you take out restricted free agent tenders, exclusive rights, minimum qualifying offers, your draft picks, your practice squad next year, which could be 12 players, could be 14, could be 16, your in-season budget. And then I haven't even talked about, our own guys that we like to re-sign. That doesn't leave a whole lot of wiggle room. However, we're in a better position than most right now, so I'm not going to complain about that. But no, it's a fluid situation basically on a day-to-day basis right now, and a lot of that has to do just because this whole situation with how much the cap is. Nobody does contracts moving into the future thinking the cap would drop that significantly, but it happened. So we'll deal with it like everybody else. But yeah, it's a daily fluid situation with our football team and everybody's probably right now.
The switching to a 3-4 defense, does that change? Are you looking for a different kind of player, maybe a different skill set at all, or not?
Yeah, I wouldn't get too caught up on the labels of 3-4, 4-3. I really wouldn't. So, I will say, Brandon kind of came up under Vic Fangio, and I worked with Vic twice, once in Carolina and once with the Colts. Now that was like over 20 years ago, so his defense has evolved a long, long way since then. So it's probably not even close to what it was then. But in the end, what we have now, what we're looking for, won't be very much different with Brandon, with how he does the defense, and kind of revolves around what the players that you have. But I wouldn't get too caught up in the 3-4, 4-3 labels. Almost everybody's a four-man front most of the time anyways. But yeah, there won't be too many changes, I wouldn't think, which is good. From a personnel standpoint, it'd be very hard right now to take everybody and kind of turn it over very quickly if guys didn't fit. And that's part of the head coaching process as far as when you're talking about what you're going to run in offense and defense. What do we have that fits? And with Brandon, especially on defense, he is very adaptable. And that not only with Brandon, but with all the assistant coaches that he hired, looking for really smart, adaptable coaches, who came from successful programs. So, our defense will be very adaptable to what we have. And in the end, we're all, you want, big, strong athletes who are football smart and play instinctive football and can get after people. So, but it's going to be a really fun defense to kind of build around.
Okay, thanks.
Gilbert.
Hey, Tom, going back to Hunter Henry, have you decided whether to use a franchise tag on him?
We're just leaving all the options open right now. So, obviously this year with where the cap is, it's makes it more difficult than other years, but I think you got to keep all doors open at this point.
Okay. I'll try one more specific player question. Sure. When Mike Williams is going to the final year of his rookie deal, do you see something maybe working out this offseason as a long-term extension for Mike Williams?
Again, you keep all options open. Mike's done a heck of a job for us, and I think he's a really, really high-level football player. The opportunities that he gets, he makes big plays for us, and it's not necessarily his fault that he's got Keenan Allen on one side and he's got Hunter Henry at tight end and Austin Eckler at running back, and there's only one football to go around. But Mike is a very talented, high-level football player in this league.
And Tom, you hear a lot the draft experts say that this offensive line class is pretty deep. How do you kind of view it so far from what you've done for scouting?
Yeah, I think it looks pretty good. I think overall, I was talking with somebody yesterday that I think it's a deep draft. I really do. So, but I don't know if the whole offensive line is deep in the draft, but there's certain areas that are better than others. But we look at it probably differently than you would. I mean, I know the focus is on the first round, but we're looking through all 7 rounds and trying to see where the depth is in different positions. Yeah, looks pretty good.
And Tom, I think last year, with the offensive line, you have kind of tinkered with it over the years. But last year, you kind of tried the veteran approach with trading for Trey Turner, signing Brian Bulaga. It didn't really work out the first year because of injuries. You think maybe, that route might, change it to a different route and going maybe draft heavy in terms of the offensive line?
It's not like we went into last year saying, hey, we're going to take a veteran approach to this. We really didn't. It just kind of worked out like that. So, yeah, I mean, the way we lined up last year, we had, 3 draft picks on left tackle, left guard, and center, and then, a trade at right guard. A trade at right guard, and then Bulaga at right tackle, at a UFA. So that's just kind of how it worked out. But it wasn't like that was the plan going in that, hey, look, we're going to go veteran heavy. It just worked out like that.
And last one for me, Tom. The focus is on the offensive line, but what are some other needs, or maybe is there one that's kind of pretty close to that you feel like you want to address during the draft?
Did you say your focus is on the offensive line, or my focus is on the offensive line?
I guess the attention on the public is on the offensive line.
Okay, I'll take the public part of it, sure. Like I said, we need to build the whole football team. There's some areas on defense we need to get a lot better at. Obviously, special teams we have to get better at it. So you can't really look at one spot and say, hey, look, if we just fix this one thing, we'll be playing for a championship. It doesn't work like that. So, we're looking to try and build the best balanced football team we can. And saying all that, I kind of forgot what you even asked at this point. But look, it has to be a wide focus. It just can't be a narrow focus at one player or one specific spot.
Yeah, I was hoping for you to be specific on this, I guess, another need, but I'm guessing.
Oh, okay. I mean, my needs and your needs are going to sound different. I mean, on offense, we weren't efficient running the ball. It's not so much about how many times you run it, but how you do run it when you do. Our red zone and goal-to-go offense, we didn't score enough points, which is a big issue in close games. And some of the low red zone was because our run game efficiency wasn't very good. But so we got to get better in those 3 categories. And then on defense, pressure and takeaways, got to get a lot better there. Our 2-minute defense really didn't play to where it needed to be. And then field position on special teams has to improve. So those are the areas we got to get better at. That's how we look at it more so than individual players.
Thank you, Tom.
Fernando.
Hey, Tom. Piggybacking off of what Gilbert said, how far do you feel like you guys are from competing in the or how far away do you feel like this team is away from competing?
Well, I think we're competing right now. I mean, it's impossible to put an answer on that, Fernando. But I'm encouraged where we are with the core base of players we have, with the coaching staff that's here. But also realize there's work to do. We were 7-9 last year, so it is what it is. We didn't make the playoffs, but now as far as competing, I think we're competing with everybody else. But I'm encouraged of where we are. Now we got some work to do, but can't wait to get back out there. Everybody has work to do in this league.
And Tom, when you guys hired Brandon, was it because of the person and the head coach that you felt like he could be, or was it also because he fit well with the personnel? His defense fit well with the personnel that you guys have on defense.
It has to be a wide ranging. So it's everything you just said, obviously, but you're looking for as much the total package as you can find. He checked off a lot of boxes for us. So.
And last one for me, Tom. This being your 3rd head coach, are you changing your approach going into this, going into free agency, going into NFL draft, or is it basically business as usual as you approached it with McCoy and Anthony Lynn as well?
Well, the approach is always to put a winning football team on the field and compete for championships. But obviously, with a new head coach, 3 new coordinators, I'm now looking through the eyes of Brandon Staley and Joe Lombardi and Ronaldo Hill and Darius Swinton. So, yeah, some things are going to be different that we're looking for. So I wouldn't call it business as usual. Maybe our processes are very similar, but we're looking at new offensive schemes, new defensive schemes, new thoughts on special teams. So the vision we're looking at does change, which is normal, which is fresh, which is fun. It really is. It's fun to go through this process. And, it takes, I told the college scouts this last week, it takes a full year of going through with this staff to get a really good feel for what they're going to do with the players we have and what their thoughts are and what their plans are, what their philosophies are. It just doesn't happen with a couple meetings. It just doesn't. It's spending a lot of time with people. So it takes a full year. Now we'll get pretty far through the month of March and into April, get a better feel. But this is a process. It's not just snap the fingers and we go. It's a totally different vision of what we're looking for.
Thank you, Tom.
Michael.
Hey, Tom, you just touched on, having a wide variety of needs you believe you need to fix with this team. And with that in mind, trying to maximize the immediate success, especially with Justin Herbert on a rookie deal. Can you kind of talk about pros and cons of deciding whether or not to fix this certain issue with free agency or possibly going through the draft to fix that issue?
You kind of line up your lists of needs that you're trying to work on. I don't prioritize it. They all need to be addressed one way or another. And like you said, there's different ways to do it. Some of it's just based on the calendar. I mean, free agency, well, we have players in-house that we're trying to develop. Free agency is next on the calendar. Then you have the draft. Then you have college free agency after the draft. You have trades anywhere in the middle there. So a lot of it's just based on the calendar as far as how you try and approach these. Now you can do a little bit of, let's look at the draft board. Let's kind of see where we are with strengths of different positions, and then compare that to the strengths of different positions in free agency, and that could dictate where you go. And that's a lot how it goes. Now, the draft board at this point, it's up. It's kind of set. Now, it will be adjusted between now and April, but we have a pretty good feel for where the positions that are strong and that aren't as strong. Free agency, it's very easy to look at, where positions of strength are. Now, what we don't know is what the market numbers will be for different players. Certainly this year, it's even more difficult to figure out where those numbers are because certainly with any free agent you sign, it's not just the talent you're signing, but it's how much are they going to cost and how do they fit into your salary cap. So there's a lot that goes into that. So you try and balance it all together and just know, hey, look, we got to address these and they all won't be addressed by March 31st. They won't all be addressed by May 1st. It goes through, the summer and August sometimes, but we'll get there.
And you just kind of touched on your board and where it's at right now. Based on your viewing so far, position-wise, where do you think this draft class is strong at?
Yeah, these are the questions I usually get at the pre-draft press conference, and I don't answer them then, so I wouldn't answer them now. But generally, I think it's a pretty strong. I was a little worried that this could be a watered-down draft, just because the number of players that opted out. Some players didn't get a chance to play this year, but I think overall it looks about normal, which has been pretty good. But yeah, there are some positions that are a little stronger than others at the top of the draft, and there are some positions that are a little deeper as you go into the 4th and 5th round. But we still got to work through that.
All right, last from me, innovation was something that was brought up a lot through the hiring of Coach Staley and kind of moving forward into this new regime. Can you talk about anything, thus far in the offseason that maybe you can point at and say, like, this is where we've innovated, this is where we've tried to kind of progress with the franchise?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you talk about innovative, I think you got to be careful. It doesn't always necessarily mean reinventing the wheel. It just means something new, something different. So obviously, I think on both sides of the ball, it's going to be different. Brandon's defense is going to be different than what we'd run in the past. Like I mentioned, as far as the type of players we're looking for, that won't change that much, but the style of defense will change. And then the offense, we're essentially building it, in-house from scratch, and it's gonna, that's gonna change. So those are, two pretty big differences right there that we got to work through, and it's kind of a fun process to go through. But yeah, there's gonna be some pretty significant changes there.
Thanks, Tom.
Joe.
Tom, as far as the meetings with Brandon, the scouts, and everything, how did those meetings go as far as maybe outlining their vision and fits for players with, their scouting during the past season?
Yeah, it went great because Brandon's so adaptable. He's not like a very inflexible coach where I have to have these specific traits at all 11 spots on defense. So, and our college scouts, and I told them this last week, they did a great job this past fall of scouting the whole player. So when we got into these meetings, yeah, some things have changed on defense and they'll probably change on offense. But it wasn't like they were saying, hey, look, hey, since we're looking for a specific type of player in the fall, now I don't know if this guy fits. Hey, I'm not sure about this. And sometimes scouts get panicked that way. Our guys, they knew the full player. So no matter what scheme we're running, no matter what we're looking for, we have discussions on players. And it was very easy, very flexible. And it's kind of that's one of the reasons why you have a meeting. The scouts, they do reports, they type up reports, they have grades, they got colors, they got verbiage. But just to sit down and talk through things is why you meet with people, because things change in this league. Even when you don't change your coaching staff, things change in this league. So our guys just knew the players really well, knew the full player, and it makes the transition, pretty seamless.
And then just kind of a two-part question about the salary cap. Do you have a sense of when those numbers are going to come in? Because there's been speculation about the TV deals wanting to get done before the start of the league year, which might help prop up the cap. But also with it going down, do you sense that there's going to be a lot more one-year deals compared to normal this year?
Well, the first part of your question, I don't have a sense as far as when they'll give us the true number, but at least we know ballpark where it's going to be. So we're kind of good there. And we would always aim low just in case, but we know ballpark where it's going to be. Could there be a lot of one-year deals? I'm not sure about that because a one-year deal is a one-year cap hit at the full amount. So that may work for some teams. It may not work for others. A multi-year deal, you can prorate the numbers down so the cap number's smaller. So remains to be seen, kind of how that plays out.
And then just in terms of the FCS guys, because their seasons are going on right now, just how are those evaluation processes going? Do you rely more on last year's tape or do you get a little bit of this year's in there too?
Yeah, we'll get a little bit of this year's. I mean, we've relied a lot on last year's tape on those guys. I will say there's a good amount of those FCS prospects that are not playing this year. They were maybe played at the Senior Bowl already. They're not participating in this spring season. So I don't know if it's going to affect that many players. But anytime you can step on the field and show people what you can do, that's a good thing.
And then just since you went through the hiring process this offseason, I think Buffalo's got a proposal out there now for the league meetings that they don't want to start the hiring process until after conference championships or the Super Bowl. Just as one who went through the process, are you in favor or against that? Or
we were going to be patient, so we would have waited as long as we needed to wait. But I understand, I think for teams in the playoffs, you work that hard. That's the most important time of the year. The less distractions, the better for that team. Say like Buffalo last year, which, they had Brian Dable interviewing, they had Leslie Frazier interviewing. So it would be better for the playoff teams if you could wait. For the teams that are looking to hire head coaches, I can only speak for us. We were going to be patient with the people that we were going to interview, and when they were ready to interview or ready to be hired, that we'd be ready to do it. So I don't know if it would have affected us too much, but other than that, I hadn't given that a lot of thought.
okay, and then just last thing from my end, because I know you talked about offensive line and everything earlier. In terms of both free agency and draft, is this a maybe above average tackle group compared to usual?
It's hard to say, but I think it's good. I have a hard time comparing year to year to year with the draft. I forget last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but there's, I think it's a good group this year.
Okay, thanks.
Tim.
Hey, thanks, Coach, thanks, Tom, for making time for us.
Thanks for calling me Coach.
I apologize for that.
No, I like it.
Lessen your role. I didn't want to do that.
Lessen my role. I'd add to my role. I'll take that.
Hey, Tom, you touched on it earlier, but would you elaborate on the evaluation process, how it was different for your scouts in years past?
Well, the biggest thing is they couldn't go into the schools. So, they couldn't go to practices. They were able to see some games this year, but not nearly as many games as usual. But the biggest thing is they couldn't go on campus this year. So that was probably the biggest difference. So they did most of their work from home. which allowed them to watch a lot more tape than probably usual because they weren't in their cars driving, they weren't on planes and airports. And then most of the information as far as getting background on the players was by Zoom like this or by phone calls. So those were the bigger changes there. And then this spring will be a little bit different with the pro days, just because there'll be a limited amount of people who can attend those pro days. I don't see that really affecting too many things. But the fall was different just because there was no travel.
Okay. And you kind of touched on this topic a little bit more, a little bit through the conversation. From your perspective, do you put more emphasis on a free agent pickup or free agent signing or the draft, or is that based on the calendar, as you kind of mentioned earlier?
I don't know if emphasis is the right word. I mean, we've kind of stated like we prefer to draft and develop our own and then supplement our football team through free agency. I don't believe in trying to buy your way through free agency. It's just hard to do, especially in a salary cap world. But we certainly value free agency, and you can see the guys that we've signed as free agents, and they've come in and played pretty good football for us. So you have to use all avenues to try and improve your football team. If you just try and rely on one or the other, I mean, you can't just be a draft-only team. I think that would be difficult. So you just use as many avenues as you can get to try and improve your team.
Okay, thank you. And Coach Staley, through our conversations with him, he really prides himself on being a teacher. You talked about what you learned about him specifically, but has he opened your eyes to any different aspects of whether it be coaching, kind of running the team, players? Has he opened your eyes to any of that?
I don't know how far we've gotten through that, but I can tell you he has a pretty good feel for what's playing in the league right now, both offense and defense, as far as the players that are out there, as far as their talent levels and the schemes that people play. So that's been great to see. Now, I haven't seen him up in front of the team yet. I haven't seen him up in front of the coaches yet as far as how he teaches and how he communicates that way. I think it's going to be pretty good, but we haven't gotten to that point yet.
Okay, and then lastly for me, again, you kind of touched on this earlier. I wanted to ask you about your impressions as the new coordinators, but you did say you haven't spent a lot of time with them. What's your initial impressions of them?
Smart and adaptable and have come from good places. Those probably be the three things. Yeah, haven't had a chance to really sit down with these guys for long periods of time, and which we will this month, and get a better feel. But the first impressions have been very positive, as well as Darius Swinton on special teams as well. It's been a really good group of guys to work with so far, but it's a process. Like I said, it's not just snap your fingers and the next day everybody's on the same page. So it takes some time, but I like where we are currently.
Thanks for your time, Tom.
No problem, Cameron.
All right, Tom, a couple more for you. Haley.
Tom, you mentioned the differences from 2020 to now. Obviously, 2020's offseason had a lot of challenges. This year, though, the same. There's no combine this year. What has this time of year been like for you guys so far? And then maybe are there advantages, though, to doing things in a virtual setting, kind of like how you talked about advantages with the coaching search in that sense?
You just need to find the advantages. We did our scouting meetings a different way this year. I kind of enjoyed it. Last year we had the combine, so that was normal. This year, no combine at all, so that's going to be a lot different. Essentially those pro days are going to serve as a combine for us as far as how we're going to collect the data on the players. So, but it's different. I was just thinking back to, before we talk about not having the combine right now, and before when the combine was at the RCA Dome and they had the old AstroTurf there. So we would try and it's hard to compare apples to oranges. So you like to have everybody run on the same surface. But back in the day when the RCA Dome just had the old AstroTurf, at the pro days there were so many different surfaces players would run on. We'd have to try and convert the times to what we think they would be if they were at Indianapolis. So at that point, you had like a fast grass field. You had a grass field that was kind of soft or long. You had old AstroTurf, which was like cement. You had new spongy AstroTurf. You had an indoor track. You had an outdoor track. I ran a guy on a 40 at the University of New Hampshire on a basketball court, diagonal from end line to end line. So we used to take all those times and then try and convert them, and we had a process that we did to convert that if they ran at Indy, this is about what the time would be. But then once field turf kind of came in, and they got field turf in Indianapolis, and most everybody has field turf on a college campus, we don't have to convert times anymore. But this year it may be different, because there may be different surfaces players run on, and we're going to have to try and look and try and compare all these historical numbers to this year, where it's not going to be the same surface, but it's things that we used to do before. So things like that are going to be different and change. But in the end, when we go through this process, a bulk of our work, and you should just talk about college scouting, the bulk of the work is done in the fall and then the winter, between the players playing football in the fall, maybe an all-star game in the winter, and then 2 different sets of meetings we have before the combine. That's where the bulk of the work is done, and then we do some work with the combine numbers and some things after that. But sometimes it's change. Anytime you change something, it kind of changes your focus a little bit, and I think that's a good thing. So you don't get stale. You look at different ways to do things, maybe even innovate a little bit and try and just change. I think that's good. I think it's a good thing to do.
And then last one for me, I think in talking to you over the last few years, the most important thing you always cite with the combine is the medical. How are you guys evaluating that this year in a year like this?
Yeah, that's a work in progress right now. That's the biggest part of the Indianapolis combine, is that the players go in to get their physicals done. So it's a totally different process this year, and we're still working through how that's exactly going to look. But that's one of those behind the scenes things. We'll get it done, but I'm not exactly sure what it's going to look like yet.
Thanks, Tom.
Omar.
Hey, Tom, good to see you.
Hey, Omar.
Hey, Brandon has said that, he wants to build around, the quarterback, the offense, the team, around Justin. And obviously there's a few different ways to go about doing that. I'm just curious what it means to you, to build around the quarterback. Is it more weapons, protection, good defense, take the pressure off, kind of just your overall philosophy on that?
Okay. The sound wasn't great there, but I think you asked about the offense and building around the quarterback. So, again, we're trying to build the whole team, good defense to get the ball back to the quarterback, good special teams that have good field position. And then it's kind of what you said. I mean, you want weapons for the quarterback. You need people they can throw it to and people to hand it off to, and you need people to protect them. So I don't think you want to just focus in on one specific aspect of your offense that you want to give the quarterback. We want to give him as much as we can.
Thank you.
All right, and last one, Pop.
Brandon, at his intro press conference, said that as an organization, you guys would look into adding more analytics staffers. You obviously hired a full-time staffer last year. Do you have plans of fleshing out that football research department at all this offseason?
Flushing out? You mean like getting rid of people?
No, fleshing out, like
oh, fleshing. Oh,
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not so much concerned about the size of the department, but how you use it. And I really like how we're using it right now, both in coaching and personnel, and then even in sports performance. So, yeah, we've got some good people here that have been working in it, and I'm, at least as of right now. I mean, yeah, for manpower, yeah, you'd always like to add some more people, but I'm pretty comfortable where we are right now. And if it gets a little bit bigger, that'd be great too.
Then just what's your overall strategy for improving the special teams? Obviously, you have a new coordinator and a new voice and different coaching approach will help. But just in terms of talent on coverage teams, specialists, how are you approaching sort of improving that unit?
Well, there's a lot that goes into it. Obviously, scheme, players. It's not like we hadn't focused on special teams before, but we got to make sure and take a better focus on to make sure our players that maybe are not frontline starters, can really play a high level on special teams. But again, it's not something that we had not focused on before. So, I think having a fresh voice would be nice. I think we have some guys here that can fit very well as far as covering kicks and punts. We need some help at gunner because we didn't have a good enough guys on the outside that really kind of fit that the way we needed to go. And then, no, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at it, but obviously, scheme and players, and then, developing what we have.
And just last one, just overall, how do you feel about what you have at corner right now on the roster?
Feel okay. I mean, I don't know. What do you want me to say?
No, that was honestly extremely telling. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, we got Michael Davis as a free agent, so we'll see where that goes. But everybody else is there. So